This is a trip that is also in the year of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And I'm wondering whether you think the events of the visit align with the idea or celebration of a Platinum Jubilee.
Well, yeah, there's a theme throughout several of the events that are marking the Platinum Jubilee. The visit is happening because it is the Platinum Jubilee year. There was a concerted attempt to have a visit during each of the Jubilee years that we've had. But also, this trip is an opportunity for the Prince of Wales to reconnect with Canada. He hasn't been here for 5 years. He normally was here every 2 to 3 years since 1970. And obviously, there's been some huge political and social change in this country in the past 5 years, thanks to many big issues, not least of which is residential schools, which was dealt with first and foremost on the tour today. So it's an opportunity for him to reconnect with his charities. It's an opportunity for him to focus on good things that are happening in our country and positive responses like the garden today and the ceremony that took place around residential schools, and also to focus on environment and sustainability issues. So there's a lot of different agendas on this tour. And all of those things are important in terms of connecting the Prince to Canada and to taking a moment out of everyone's kind of other things to think of things other than just the day-to-day aspects of life.
So who sets the agenda?
Well, the agendas are negotiated between the governments involved, Government of Canada, Newfoundland, Northwest Territories, and of course the royal visitor. Their interests are taken into account. But I mean, ultimately, the Prince of Wales is in a really key position because he is the next holder of the crown. He is next wearer of the crown. So what he does has important constitutional significance for Canada. And so, his comments today are very heavily coordinated with the government, and they are sending a message in terms of what is important about the tour and how the royal family and the crown more specifically is going to respond to some of those issues. And this is a listening tour, an opportunity for the prince to listen to the voices of Indigenous people largely.
Yeah, he mentioned that. We're just taking a live shot here of the plane, which is now touched down in Ottawa and is taxiing in. We'll keep an eye on this plane for the prince and the duchess when they disembark. And so we'll keep that up as we talk here. Richard, let me ask you about the next couple of days. It's a very quick visit, 3 days in total. Same sort of idea here, as you mentioned, a listening tour, a chance to reconnect with the issues that are very close to the prince's heart, Indigenous issues and environment.
Yeah, and let's remember, there's about 35 engagements over 3 days. It's a good thing that Prince does not eat lunch because he doesn't have time for that. And so, for example, tomorrow, you'll also see him, in addition to those issues, he's also going to be meeting with the Ukrainian community. So that is obviously a really central world issue right now. Canada has taken a particular position. The Prince is obviously going to be supporting the Ukrainian refugees that we have in this country. He'll also be meeting with Afghan refugees, another an issue very important in Canadian life. So he'll be meeting with a group that's helping to settle refugees. He's dealing with sustainability. He's talking to people who manage his Prince's Trust in Canada. So, and they're also going to a school to talk about, how the issue of incorporation of people from other cultures into Canadian societies. So multiculturalism issues. There's a lot going on. And then we move on to Yellowknife, where we have a real day focused on Indigenous issues, treaty relationships, and also the impact of the environment on traditional ways of life, as well as Indigenous languages in schools. So there's a lot going on this tour. There's a lot to pick and choose for you, depending on what is important to you. There's a lot of different parts of what is important in our national life right now being marked on this visit.
It must be hard, though, to navigate that fine line, right? Because it's a royal visit. They represent certain things to certain people. They want to hit the right tone. Do you think the prince hit that tone this afternoon or earlier today when we heard him speak?
Well, it's actually going to be one of his few major speeches, if not his only speech on this tour. He'll just be giving brief remarks in a couple of other occasions. I thought the speech was really carefully crafted, and it was a real survey of our history, the history of the Queen with the country, major events the Queen has been involved with, his own history with the country, focusing on Canada's role in the world, Canada's image in the world, what Canada thinks of itself. But that speech ended, and the focal point at the end of that speech was on reconciliation. And he made the point that he and the Duchess are here to learn and to listen, and they're going to walk the journey of reconciliation with Canadians. He's not here to tell us what to do, because that's clearly the government's responsibility as a policy matter. But he is here to walk with us, and he will be making symbolic gestures, as he did today, and the very first engagement on the tour in going to the garden where Indigenous young people are memorialized. So it was a very clever way of framing the trip. It's not about a lot of the things that people say it is. It's about these issues that are important in Canada right now.